Guys, I am really excited to be back to do another trucking history video. It's been a while, but I'm going to get back to doing it every Sunday. I've got a whole bunch of videos in mind that I'm going to be doing for some companies, but today, as you guys know, I've got this truck collection in the back. I'd like to have, different trucks of companies I've done, and today we're going to be adding this little thing to the shelf. Yep, that's right, Navajo. Now, we're going to be talking about the original Navajo, not the Navajo that we see on the road today. They're kind of the same company, but not at all, and it will be explained by the end of the wrap-up of this story here. The reason we're not talking about the new Navajo is because that whole company pretty much will probably get its own video here one of these days. So let's get started on talking about the line of the Blue-Eyed Indian. All right, guys, so the history starts as a company named Red Arrow Transportation Company was started in 1934. And it later changed its name to, get this, Kansas City, Los Angeles Flyer Transport Company. Well, that's a pretty long name. Anyway, the company struggled. It never really did all that good. And in 1940, a guy named Mitch Howe, he went by, had a vision to move freight, aside from the actual traditional railroad lines. Basically, the lines in between that needed moved, that didn't have the capacity to handle this in the railroad lines. So he decided to buy that company, and he renamed it Navajo Freight Lines. He then changed, or then decided to buy some other companies to acquire new lines. And he later acquired Colorado, New Mexico Express, later on in 1940, the same year, and he named it Navajo Express Lines. He then acquired Tucumari truck lines, and that extended routes to Amarillo and Roswell, and he renamed that Navajo Truck Lines. So after that, he then brought all three companies together in what became known as Navajo Freight Lines. And so he owned the company and kept expanding it up until 1950. Let me look here. I'm wrong. I lost it there. Oh, 1953. He sold his interest in the company, and I assume that he sold it to, I don't know, a company or a conglomerate, because it doesn't actually say who it was sold to. But he sold his rights to that, and it did continue to grow after that to some pretty awesome stories. So as soon as Mitch Howe bought the company, he moved it to Los Angeles, California, very briefly. It then moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, where it was headquartered for much of its life until its sale years later. This brings us up to World War II time, and by the end of World War II, Navajo was operating, 5,000 trucks. Approximately 5,000 trucks, had 67 terminals and 3,000 employees. Remember, I don't remember, maybe I didn't tell you yet, but they were very strategic with the team operations, the sleeper truck team operations. That's why they had a lot less employees than they had trucks. And so I actually looked into the background of Mitch Howe to see why it is named Navajo, and it turns out that was a geographical name because they were going to be located in the Southwest, and that was going to be their running area. They decided to use a name that, basically said Southwest United States at the time. And in fact, there's always been a lot of controversy apparently about the name, because no owner of Navajo has ever been a Navajo Indian. But they did come through for the Navajos in 1947. And there was a Life magazine article. A lot of this comes from a book, I do have to say. I don't have the book, but there is a book out there called The Route of the Blue-Eyed Indian. And it's the Navajo Freight Line story, and it was written by James Wilmarth. But in 1947, there was a Life magazine article about Navajo Freight Lines delivering food and goods to the Navajo Indians of New Mexico. It's also called, the article is called, or the whole movement itself was called, the Mile of Trucks, or the Navajo Brotherhood Caravan. They ran supplies from Albuquerque to Gallup, New Mexico. roughly 90 miles south of Shiprock, where the Indians took possession of the supplies. The Navajos were facing starvation and even death during the onset of the winter, and people throughout the state were giving aid. Other organizations also helped. The American Red Cross appropriated $100,000 for immediate stopgap aid and rushed disaster relief workers to Navajo country. A Navajo Trail Relief Caravan Association gathered food and clothing in California and moved 7 truckloads to the reservation. It was not actually Navajo truck lines in that, but Utah citizens helped too. Congress voted $2 million in relief. So when the Navajo Indians were facing this starvation and all kinds of problems there, Navajo freight lines came through and made sure to deliver goods to them. And that's a pretty good story. And of course, it was a Life article, so you've seen some pretty cool pictures here about it. And let's move on to when Navajo went to the Supreme Court. So Navajo was the lead in a lawsuit against Illinois, right? Is that one? Yeah. Yes, in Illinois. Because, and this is interesting, this really doesn't happen too much anymore, but other companies joined in on them. And it's really kind of a stupid law, but when you think about how this affects trucking and interstate commerce now, they sued Illinois because Illinois wanted to require all trucks to have a certain curved mud guard on the back of their trucks. And the problem with this is that a lot of other states required trucks to have mud flaps. And so Navajo went and sued, I keep wanting to say Chicago, Illinois, over this because it would affect let me look here at what the, unconstitution under the Commerce Clause, basically saying that this would not allow interstate movement because a truck illegal in one state would not be legal in the next state, and vice versa. And they won the lawsuit, and that's why we don't know what these mud guards are now. But there was a lot of this over the years. There was the weight restrictions in the South. We've talked about different states only allowing a maximum weight of certain amounts. And over the years, it's actually come to where we can move interstate, but it's weird when you think back all that had to go into that to make that happen because of local laws conflicting with the overall, interstate laws. And when you think about it, it was, this was probably although it was a minor issue, a big move and a big ruling that was probably used many times later in other court cases as they were trying to allow, interstate movement. So here's an issue that comes up with a lot of these companies from the past. I know if you look at my video, and I will put it up here, when I did Preston, the 151 line, they faced a lot of the same issues, and I feel it's important to talk about in these videos because it's, I don't want to say it's a non-issue now, but race relations. And in 1972, Navajo Freight Lines was accused by the Teamsters of pursuing policies and practices in recruiting, hiring, promoting, assigning, and transferring that discriminated against blacks and persons of Mexican origin. Okay, so at the time, they employed 600 plus over-the-road drivers and had not had a black driver until November 11th, 1970. 36 years after the company originally started under its original name and 30 years after it was turned into Navajo Freight Lines. Or a Spanish surnamed driver until August 6, 1971. And they were both hired after Navajo was informed that they'd been referred to the Department of Justice for prosecution. So, okay, they were warned about this. You need to be equal. And all right, so during the time that they hired this one black driver and this one Spanish surname driver, they hired 92 additional white drivers. Basically, the court's decision reminded Navajo that no singular group should be discriminated against and or given preferential treatment on the basis of race. This has come up a lot in former videos that I've done, especially companies that were around way back then. You know, we don't think about it today. But, you know, what people say now is race problems is nothing like what it was back then. I mean, you know, it could just be a coincidence, but it's not a coincidence. For 30 years, or 40 years, 30 years, there was no black drivers that applied or that were qualified, or Spanish surnames drivers, especially being in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So apparently they overcame that, and I would hope that by the end they were a pretty diverse company. But let's talk about what happened to Navajo in the end. So it's not clear why Navajo decided to sell in 1978. Maybe they were made an offer they couldn't refuse. Maybe it's because they knew that deregulation was coming. It's unknown. But they were sold in 1978 to ABF. And ABF was criticized for this. ABF bought them so that they would have terminals and coast-to-coast operations. But deregulation was coming. People thought that they should have just let the company go and later on bought up what they needed because deregulation was coming. But it was a bold move that paid off for ABF. And I did a history on ABF. They're one of my favorite companies ever. They are a survivor company. They have done crazy things over the years to you know, remain where they are today, which is one of the only you know, Teamster LTL companies anymore, and still going strong. So I actually do have the history for ABF up here, and you can check that out. It was an awesome story. But they bought it. They absorbed Navajo, basically just got rid of Navajo. They absorbed it all into their operations, used the properties that they needed, and sold off properties. And when deregulation came, obviously they're one of the few companies that's still around, you know, that had survived deregulation and survived the times, everything else. But they absorbed it, so there was no Navajo. Now, here's where it comes that I say Navajo that we see on the roads now is not the same company, but it is. It is, but not. And it's because Don Digby Sr. bought the rights to the Navajo name, an already existing name. That's why you see basically the same trucks going down the road now that say Navajo and Digby on them. He then changed the company, I forget, yeah, Navajo Express now, right? I don't have it written down here, but the Navajo we have now, he did change the name. It's a totally different company, but it's still, it was still the rights that, you know, Don Digby Sr. bought. That's also why we're not talking about that on this video, because it's a whole different company now. And I think Digby, Navajo, that whole combination that's located in Denver, Colorado, is probably going to get their own story here one of these days, as I love doing these history stories. So, hey, if you know the Digbys or you work for them, you can reach out to me, tell me some history. You know, I love looking up history. I love studying it, but sometimes it's great to actually hear it right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. You know, the actual history of the company. I do know that the company is run by Don Jr. and another. I'm sorry, I didn't write it down here. I have it up, but that's okay. That's going to come on that video. But that is why you see Navajo nowadays, and you see Navajo. Two separate companies, but still the same entity over the years. So the Navajo you see now, you can actually trace that company back to 1934. All right, guys, despite having this truck for a while, I don't put them on the shelf until I've done the story on them. And this little Navajo there that I have is now officially on the shelf. So guys, I've acquired a lot of them trucks, and I said before, I don't even care what kind of toy it is. I have some First Gear up there. I have some Winross. That one was some cheap little, I don't even know what company it was. Came with some other trucks. So I don't care what they are. I just like to have them up there so when I see them, you know, like just the other day, I kind of forgot the St. Johnsbury history. And I was walking in, I looked at that, and I went back and watched my own video to remember the history of it all. So, you know, it's fun for me. It's fun for, you know, when you guys can see it in the background. And now, like I say, I'm going to get back on this and do Trucking History Sunday. I'm going to try to drop every Sunday. In fact, right now, I'm going to promise you I'll drop every Sunday. But sometimes things happen in life, but I am going to try that. I'm also doing Wednesdays. It's going to be a basically a comedy. It's going to turn into like a variety show, hopefully, if it goes over well. That's a new tried idea, but there's going to be, this week I can tell you there's going to be some parodies of some other YouTubers, trucking YouTubers that are friends of mine, you know, included with some props. Some stories, you know, from the liar's counter at the truck stops, things like that. So check that out this Wednesday at 6 p.m. It's going to be pretty cool. And then Fridays at 6 p.m. Basically, I just do loads that I did on the road, you know, the day in the life, basically, of a trucker, depending on where I was. Last week I was local. The week before that I was doing, you know, videos Kentucky to Virginia. A couple weeks ago I was out in Phoenix. So, you know, I do a variety of things, you know, based on usually time of year, things like that. But anyway, guys, I really appreciate you watching this. And, you know, like, subscribe if you haven't already. Comment below. I read all the comments. I try to respond as best as I can. If you want to email me, you know, trucking story, if you don't want to put it on there, you can email me at finchresources@gmail.com. And that's actually going to be a big source for a lot of the comedy stuff that I do. Just, you know, funny truck driver stories or funny things that happen in trucking, things like that. But also for these history videos. But I do have trucks to add to the shelf, and I just haven't done the videos yet. So I'm going to do a video next week. What am I going to do? Well, I'm not going to keep you hanging. And this I'm excited about because this is a Winross double trailers, and I do not have any double trailers, especially not in the Winross. So what's inside? Yep, there it is. And that'll be next Sunday. I can't wait to get that thing on the shelf. I can't wait to do this story. I've already done a little bit of it, and let me tell you something. Watkins ended up a lot like Montford. I'll just leave it at that. It's a real happy ending, but I will leave it at that. Anyway, guys, thanks again for watching. I appreciate it. You can find me on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and Substack. I do a little bit of different stuff on each of those. So anyway, guys, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.